Fact, most of the Bibles that are missing certain verses, such as Matthew 17:21, are actually the more accurate Bibles based on earliest existent texts. I get asked a ton about missing verses in some Bibles, specifically Matthew 17:21. And while I posted a video about this the other day, I'm going to go in a little more depth on it. So in Matthew 17, a man comes to Jesus asking for prayer for his son who is suffering from seizures and often falls in dangerous places. Fire, water, it's just not good. The man goes to the disciples for help, but their prayers are ineffective. So Jesus gets a little miffed at the situation, calls out the force tormenting the boy, and the boy is fully healed. So the disciples are like, yo, what's up? Why couldn't we do that? And you got to remember, the disciples had been healing and casting out demons since Matthew 10. But here we are, Matthew 17. In this one, they couldn't. So they were obviously confused as to why not. Matthew 17:20 says, you don't have enough faith, Jesus told them. I tell you the truth, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. In some popular Bible translations, the King James, the New King James, the NASB, and a few others add in 17:21. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. And as most of us Protestants are handed that NKJV at our baptisms, we think that verse has been there since the beginning. But every single shred of evidence points to Matthew 17:21 not being there from the beginning. Now, a few things happen when people that are raised with that verse being in the Bible sees that it's not in other Bibles. Most notably, cognitive dissonance sets in, and that righteous indignation flows strong. Why are they taking out that verse? Especially as that verse refers to the casting out of demons, right? I mean, it's a pretty big deal, especially as it refers to why a person casting out a demon might not be successful. Oh, I didn't fast enough. Oh, I didn't pray enough. What are they trying to hide from us? And I get that. For some folks, they wrap a lot of their personal dogma around Matthew 17:21, especially folks involved in deliverance ministries and stuff like that. And I admire people's passion. I get it. I'm not discounting you. I was once in that boat. When you're handed something and told to believe that every single line has been there from the beginning and is an absolute, it's jarring when you find out that it's actually an absolute fact. 0 of the earliest existent copies of Matthew, including Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, they don't have that verse. It's assumed that the scribes who later added it were attempting to bring this scene in Matthew 17 more in line with the book of Mark, specifically Mark 9:29. But there's no conspiracy there, really. This is what translators sometimes did when grouping these individual books together. So don't be upset. It happens. Another example is where Mark 16:9-19 was obviously added later to bring the ending of that gospel more in line with the other gospels, and that might have opened a can of worms for some of you, but go back and check your Bible's footnotes. You'll see that what happened after the crucifixion in Mark was added later. Almost every Bible will bracket this section or mention that in the footnotes. So better translations are now taking Matthew 17:21 out or putting it down in the footnotes. And some of these versions are the ASV, the CEV, the ESV, the CSB, the NCV, the NLT, the NIV, and the NRSV. But instead of changing all their verse numbers, they just delete the verse and number entirely, or they'll reference it elsewhere in the footnotes. And there's no conspiracy. The newer Bibles are giving a more accurate representation of the source text, and that's a good thing. And since this event is also referenced in Mark 9:29, it's still in the Bible. But another problem comes up when you read Mark 9:29, the and fasting part. That was added to that text later as well. The earliest copies of Mark don't have the and fasting part. Why? Some historians think it's because of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century church's position on the importance of fasting. Some early church fathers like Tertullian put such an emphasis on fasting. An example is when teaching on Cornelius' prayer in Acts 10, when the angel said, "Thy prayer is heard," in Acts 10:31, Tertullian taught it as "thy fasting is heard." And some early church fathers and scribes went so far to say that they thought fasting was more important than prayer. So it is entirely plausible that when later scribes saw prayer in their minds, since prayer and fasting was so tightly woven together, That's the way that they understood the text to read. Like I said, not a conspiracy. It's how human translation works. And if you think about it, it was a way to help people understood why their prayers might not be as effective as they desired. Think about it. Go back and read the verse again, 17:20. You don't have enough faith, Jesus told them. I tell you the truth, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. Now, in every early copy of Matthew, that is where this conversation ends. But when you add in the later edition of 17:21, let's read it again. You don't have enough faith. I tell you the truth, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it would move. Nothing would be impossible. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Now think about that on a deeper level. It's quite a difference, isn't it? Lots of implications there, aren't there? Jesus is simply saying it's about faith, and the disciples didn't have enough. And Jesus is rightly miffed. By this point, they had seen Jesus perform insane miracles, feeding thousands of people from simple loaves and fish, mutes, lepers, paralytics, the blind all healed, the dead raised. They had seen some stuff and even did a lot of it themselves. But yet in this particular situation, they didn't have faith. But this later edition of Matthew 17:21 adds in that little qualifier. However, this kind does not come out except by prayer and fasting, which changes things up a bit, doesn't it? Now, something else I want to quickly address again is when a lot of people see stuff like this, they immediately jump to Revelation 22:19, which is a warning against removing words from this book of prophecy. And modern Christians believe this to be a warning against removing words from the Bible. But when Revelation 22:19 was written, the Bible did not exist. Revelation 22:19 is referring to that specific book of prophecy, the book of Revelation. We can't take a warning we read in Revelation to apply it to the rest of a collection of works which haven't been gathered together as a whole yet and wouldn't be gathered together for centuries later. Context is really important there. Look, lots of verses were added and removed from the Bible. Its books were debated for centuries. I mean, Revelation barely made the cut. The history of the Bible's construction is a lot wilder than we've been led to believe. And again, this is not attacking the validity of the Bible. Do we just throw it out because there have been changes to it over the centuries? That is a ridiculous, silly argument to make. And yes, I think we should ask questions about the Bible. And I think that's a healthy thing to do and helps deepen one's faith. Instead of burying your head in the sand and going, la, 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 la. That's not healthy. Questions are good. Knowing history is good. Questions are what deepen relationships, not settling for surface level. Let's be like the Bereans and ask the hard questions and not be afraid of the hard answers. Faith is a mystery to be embraced, not an instruction manual to ritually and mindlessly follow. God bless, and see you soon.